All right, let's talk about obsession. Not your everyday can't stop binge watching kind of obsession. We're talking about the kind that eats away at you, that gnaws at your sanity until it's all that's left. That's the kind of obsession that consumed Dr. Aris Thorne. Picture this: a cluttered, claustrophobic office at a prestigious university in Boston. It's way past midnight, the only light spilling from a single, anemic desk lamp illuminating the gaunt, intense face of a man in his late 40s. He's Dr. Aris Thorne, a marine archaeologist, though archaeologist feels like an understatement when you look at his workspace. His walls, not degrees or awards, but a chaotic mosaic of ancient nautical charts, faded sketches of mythical sea beasts, and grainy satellite images marked with arcane symbols. For decades, Aris had been the laughingstock of his field, his singular, unwavering belief that Atlantis wasn't just some dusty old philosopher's allegory, it was real. A thriving, highly advanced civilization swallowed by the ocean, not in a blink, but in a single, cataclysmic day and night. His colleagues called him a crackpot. His funding dwindled to nearly nothing. His personal life? Well, let's just say his closest companions were dusty tomes and lukewarm coffee. But Aris didn't care, he knew. And recently, something shifted. A whisper in the academic echo chamber that grew louder with each passing week. It started with a routine deep-sea exploration off the coast of the Azores, a desolate, forgotten corner of the Atlantic. A remotely operated vehicle, ROV, had snagged on something unexpected in a newly discovered trench, something so ancient it defied classification. What they pulled up wasn't gold or pottery or anything you'd find in a museum. It was a fragment of obsidian, dark as pitch, impossibly smooth and cold to the touch, even after being out of the ocean for hours. This wasn't just any rock. Etched into its surface were symbols, intricate and alien, unlike any known script or glyph. They shimmered under light, almost seeming to shift. Aris had spent weeks, sleepless nights really, hunched over the fragment, his gaunt fingers tracing the impossibly fine lines. He called it the Azores Shard. The linguistic structure hinted at a complexity that made ancient Sumerian look like a child's scribble, and the subtle, unsettling iconography, swirling patterns that seemed to mimic constellations, yet were entirely unfamiliar, spoke of a civilization far beyond anything known to humanity. This wasn't just proof for Aris, it was a lifeline. It sparked a tiny, desperate flame of renewed interest from the university, enough to secure a meager research grant. And with that grant came an unexpected addition: Serafina Vance. She wasn't an archaeologist, she was a journalist, a sharp, ambitious investigative reporter from a major network, known for her brutal skepticism and an uncanny ability to sniff out a fraud. Her presence grated on Aris's nerves, a constant reminder of the world's doubt. But he needed the exposure, the public interest her network could generate. He just hoped she wouldn't expose him as the fraud everyone already assumed he was. Little did they both know, the real story wasn't just about finding a lost city. It was about something far, far darker, waiting beneath the waves. Something that had been sleeping for millennia and was about to wake up. All right, so Dr. Aris Thorne, our brilliant, borderline unhinged archaeologist, has his obsidian shard and a begrudging journalist, Serafina Vance, by his side. Now it's time to get down to business. Their destination? That desolate, storm-battered patch of ocean off the Azores, precisely where the shard was pulled from the abyss. They charter a research vessel, the Triton's Folly. Don't let the name fool you. This wasn't some luxury yacht. This was a rust bucket of a ship, creaking and groaning with every swell, held together by sheer willpower and the superstitions of its grizzled captain, Elias Blackwood. Blackwood was a man carved from the sea itself, his face a roadmap of sun-baked wrinkles, his eyes holding the wary glint of someone who'd seen too much out in the deep. He tolerated Thorne's academic eccentricities, but he made it clear, the ocean had its secrets, and some were best left buried. The rest of the crew were a small handful of oceanographers, competent but skeptical, used to charting mundane seabed topography, not hunting mythical cities. As the Triton's Folly sliced through the choppy Atlantic, an unsettling shift began. The ship's high-tech sonar, usually a symphony of precise pings, started to pick up anomalies as they neared the designated coordinates. Not just random seabed clutter, but distinct, almost impossibly geometric patterns beneath the seafloor. lines, angles, curves that defied any natural formation. It was like looking at a blueprint buried miles deep. The screens flickered with ghost images, blurring the boundaries between solid rock and something else entirely. The atmosphere on board grew thick with an almost palpable tension. The crew, hardened veterans of the deep, started acting off. The ship's usually robust electromagnetic systems began to glitch. Communications crackled with static, punctuated by strange, high-pitched hums that seemed to vibrate in your teeth. And then, the whispers. It started subtly, a low, indistinct murmur, just at the edge of hearing, echoing through the ship's internal communication system, even when no one was speaking. Captain Blackwood blamed faulty wiring, but the look in his eyes told a different story. Then, late one night, it escalated dramatically. A young deckhand, a burly kid named Billy, stumbled out of his bunk, his eyes wide and vacant. He was muttering incoherently about glowing lights and a city made of glass deep below. Before anyone could react, he lunged for the railing, clawing at the safety netting, screaming about them calling him. It took 3 men to wrestle him down, his strength unnatural, his body convulsing as if fighting an invisible force. He was locked in the infirmary, sedated, and muttering about voices from the deep. Serafina, the ever-skeptical journalist, had been documenting everything, her camera rolling on the sonar screens, her voice cool and detached. But the incident with Billy, combined with the inexplicable electromagnetic interference that kept corrupting her recordings, began to chip away at her professional veneer. She found herself standing on the deck late at night, staring at the endless, inky blackness of the ocean, a prickling sense of unease crawling up her spine. The whispers, she realized, weren't just on the comms anymore. They felt like they were coming from below. The depths, it seemed, were starting to push back. All right, so the Triton's Folly is bobbing above whatever ancient secret lies miles beneath the waves. Dr. Aris Thorne is practically vibrating with barely contained excitement. And even Serafina Vance, our tough-as-nails journalist, has a new, unsettling glint in her eyes after the incident with Billy. The static, the whispers, the geometric anomalies on the sonar, it all pointed to one thing: they had to go down. They brought out the Nautilus IV. This wasn't some luxury submarine for tourists. This was a state-of-the-art deep-sea submersible, built to withstand pressures that would crush a battleship. It was a sphere of reinforced titanium and composite glass, bristling with external lights, robotic arms, and high-definition cameras. Inside, it was cramped, cold, and smelled faintly of ozone and recycled air. Aris Thorne, of course, insisted on being in the first exploratory dive. Who else would? Serafina, ever the dedicated reporter, knew this was the story of a lifetime, a potential career maker or breaker. She squeezed into the submersible alongside him, gripping her camera. The third occupant was a seasoned pilot, a quiet man named Mitch who looked like he'd seen it all, but you could tell even he had a knot of unease in his stomach. The hatch sealed with a heavy clang, plunging them into near darkness until the internal lights flickered on. Mitch ran through the final checks, his voice calm, almost robotic over the comms. Then slowly, agonizingly, the Nautilus IV began its descent. The first few thousand feet were routine. The external lights, powerful as they were, struggled to pierce the inky blackness. It was like dropping into a bottomless well, the vastness of the ocean pressing in on them from all sides. You could hear the faint, high-pitched whine of the ballast pumps, the hum of the life support systems, and the increasingly rapid thud of your own heart. Then, things got weird. At around 8,000 feet, the submersible's instruments began to flicker. The pressure gauges jumped erratically, then stabilized at impossible readings. The comm system, usually a crisp line to the Triton's Folly, filled with a distorted, grinding static. Mitch, the unflappable pilot, cursed under his breath. "Never seen anything like it," he mumbled, wrestling with the controls. And then, it happened. On the external monitors, piercing the suffocating blackness, something appeared. Not rock, not seabed, but intricate, crystalline structures. They weren't just dark shapes, they glowed faintly with an internal luminescence, a soft, ethereal blue that pulsed rhythmically. It was like looking at something alive. "My God," Aris whispered, pressing his face against the thick viewport, his breath misting the glass. Serafina, forgetting her camera for a moment, just stared, her mouth slightly agape. What they were seeing was unmistakable, a wall, a colossal, perfectly formed wall of a city stretching up from the abyssal plain, its impossible geometry defying natural formation. As Mitch expertly maneuvered the Nautilus IV closer, a vast opening materialized in the glowing wall, a gateway. It wasn't blasted open or decayed, it looked intentional, a grand entrance to somewhere. It led into the heart of the submerged city. The hum that had been plaguing the Triton's Folly intensified, resonating through the Nautilus IV's hull, a low, throbbing sound that felt like it was vibrating inside their very bones. The sub's cameras, designed for crystal-clear imagery, began to distort, showing fleeting, almost spectral figures moving within the faint blue glow, too indistinct to be human, too ethereal to be real. Serafina hit record, her heart pounding. Her skepticism had been completely, utterly annihilated. She was no longer just reporting a story. She was a witness. And the feeling in the air was palpable. They weren't just discovering a lost city. They were entering a world they weren't meant to see. So, the Nautilus IV has just slipped through a glowing, impossible gateway, leaving the crushing blackness of the deep ocean for the even more unsettling illumination of a truly alien city. Dr. Aris Thorne, Serafina Vance, and Mitch the pilot are now inside. What greeted them was beyond anything they could have imagined. This wasn't some crumbling ruin. This was a city frozen in time, yet eerily alive. The architecture was a mind-bending fusion of organic fluidity and razor-sharp geometry, unlike any human design. Buildings seemed to flow into one another, constructed from materials that didn't just reflect light, but seemed to absorb and re-emit it, casting the entire submerged metropolis in that soft, pulsating blue glow. The streets were smooth, almost polished, and the air inside the chamber, a strange, pressurized pocket of water, felt strangely still, almost like the breath of something ancient. Mitch, his usual stoicism faltering, maneuvered the Nautilus IV slowly through the vast, silent boulevards. They passed grand plazas where colossal, sculpted figures stood, their forms elegant but alien, hinting at the beings who once lived here. Integrated into the structures were advanced yet completely unidentifiable technological devices. Some pulsed faintly with that internal luminescence, others hummed with a low, almost imperceptible thrum. They looked like complex machines, but also felt like living organisms, part of the very fabric of the city. Aris, his archaeologist's mind reeling, knew this wasn't just ancient, it was other. Their journey led them deeper, towards a towering structure at the city's heart, a grand, temple-like edifice that dwarfed everything else. Its surface was carved with intricate patterns, swirling and interlocking, almost hypnotic to behold. This was it. This felt like the core of Atlantis. Inside the colossal temple, a sight both awe-inspiring and deeply unsettling awaited them. Arrays of more obsidian tablets, far larger and more numerous than the fragment Aris had found, stood arranged in a vast circular chamber. These weren't just decorative, they were enormous archives, covered in the same chilling, complex inscriptions as the Azores Shard. As Aris frantically started photographing them, recognizing familiar symbols and piecing together fragments of meaning, a terrifying picture began to emerge. These tablets weren't just a historical record of Atlantis, they contained the truth of its catastrophic demise. The Atlanteans, it seemed, weren't destroyed by a natural disaster. They were annihilated by their own hubris. They had discovered and attempted to harness an unknown, immensely powerful energy source, something so fundamental and volatile it defied all known physics. Their attempt to control it had backfired spectacularly, unleashing an uncontrolled cataclysm that, in a single, horrific day and night, had swallowed their entire civilization, pulling it down into the crushing depths. But that wasn't the most chilling part. The tablets also hinted at a lingering, ethereal presence within the city. A collective consciousness, perhaps, or an echo of the Atlantean populace, sustained by the residual energy of that cataclysm. They weren't just finding a ruin. They were in a tomb that was still somehow inhabited. Suddenly, without warning, a powerful surge of energy ripped through the Nautilus IV. The lights flickered wildly, the subsystems screamed, and an impossible amount of pressure built around them. For a terrifying, fleeting moment, they were plunged not into darkness, but into a vivid, hyper-realistic vision. The city alive, teeming with Atlanteans, then the ground cracking, the sky tearing open, and the sea rising, not gently, but like a monstrous, devouring maw. Screams, silent in the water, echoed in their minds. Then, just as quickly, it was gone, leaving them trembling in the still, blue-lit chamber. They had seen it, the city's final moments, and the horrifying realization dawned on Aris. They hadn't just uncovered a lost city. They had stumbled into a graveyard where the dead were still somehow clinging to existence. And perhaps they weren't just clinging to existence. Perhaps they were reaching out. So they've seen it, the agonizing, fiery death of Atlantis. They've witnessed the cataclysm, the very moment an unimaginable power tore a civilization apart. And now, Aris, Seraphina, and Mitch are back on the Triton's Folly, reeling from what they've experienced. The discovery sent literal shockwaves through the scientific community. Dr. Aris Thorne, the eccentric crackpot, was suddenly hailed as a visionary, a modern-day Columbus of the deep. News channels clamored for interviews. University grants poured in. Seraphina Vance's footage, though slightly corrupted by the Atlantean energies, went viral, showing glimpses of glowing structures and inexplicable distortions that baffled experts worldwide. But this newfound fame, this validation, came with a terrifying price. Back on the surface, the team started experiencing increasingly disturbing phenomena. It began subtly, recurring nightmares, vivid and horrifying, of the sinking city, of the crushing pressure, of the silent screams of the Atlanteans. They'd wake up in cold sweats, the spectral hum of the deep-sea temple still resonating in their ears. Then, the whispers from the Triton's Folly's comm system intensified. They weren't just static anymore. They were faint, guttural sounds, like voices speaking from a great distance, just at the edge of comprehension. Dr. Thorne, instead of celebrating, became increasingly withdrawn. His obsession, once focused on discovery, now turned to fear. He spent every waking moment hunched over the newly acquired obsidian tablets, frantically deciphering a final chilling warning inscribed on them. The ancient language, once a puzzle, now felt like a curse. He rarely slept, muttering to himself about residual consciousness and unstable resonance. Seraphina, reviewing her pristine camera footage from the Nautilus IV, noticed something deeply unsettling. In the background of several shots, almost imperceptible unless you knew what to look for, were subtle, fleeting distortions in the light. Not just camera glitches, but translucent, shimmering forms, almost as if the Atlantean spirits, those echoes of a lost populace, were trying to communicate or even manifest. She saw faces, then they were gone. She heard faint cries, but they were drowned out by static. It was enough to make the hairs on her neck stand on end. Meanwhile, back on the Triton's Folly, the crew reported more than just whispers. Objects would move on their own, a wrench clattering to the deck from a locked toolbox, a coffee mug sliding across a table. Captain Blackwood, the grizzled veteran, swore he saw shadow figures flitting in his peripheral vision in the ship's empty corridors. The ship's navigation system started throwing out phantom readings, guiding them away from their course, deeper into uncharted waters. They all had the unnerving sensation of being watched, of being judged from below. Then came the final, terrifying revelation that Aris extracted from the deepest layers of the Atlantean tablets. The energy source they had tried to harness, the one that had swallowed them whole, wasn't completely dormant. It was still active, a pulsating heart deep within the sunken city. And it wasn't just affecting their equipment, it was influencing them. The nightmares, the whispers, the hallucinations, they weren't just psychological trauma. They were direct effects of this reawakening energy, subtly manipulating their minds, feeding on their fear, slowly eroding their sanity. The Atlanteans hadn't just been consumed by their own power. Their collective consciousness, tethered to this rogue energy, still existed, trapped within the city. And now, awakened by Aris Thorne's desperate search, this ancient ethereal presence wasn't just lingering. It was beginning to reactivate, not only within the city, but also subtly influencing the minds of those who dared to disturb its rest. The team had found Atlantis, but in doing so, they hadn't just unearthed a lost civilization. They had awakened something ancient, something hungry, something that was now reaching out from the forbidden depths to claim its next victims. The question wasn't if they could escape Atlantis. It was whether Atlantis would ever truly let them go. And as the Triton's Folly continued to drift, sometimes seemingly of its own accord, toward unseen horizons, they knew one thing for sure. the price of knowledge, of disturbing the dead, was a debt they might never be able to repay.